Hi there YouTubers, welcome to my channel. Today the video is about aspects in the system, using the systems approach to Vedic astrology. It's important you understand that in this type of astrology we use the sidereal zodiac. And systems approach to Vedic astrology was developed by Professor Chaudhry, and what it is using its Vedic astrology streamlined, skinny down, because Vedic astrology is a huge subject. Volumes and volumes and volumes of material, and it's considered that to become proficient at Vedic astrology takes 20-year apprenticeship, which I appreciate actually. If you're going to be an expert in any regard with respect to destiny and the lives of people, well, that's going to take 20 years. But systems approach, if you're already familiar with astrology somewhat, then it's just streamlined. It's just discards a whole lot of distraction so that you can get to the important stuff. And what I'm going to do today, the subject is aspects, and I'm going to use my birth chart to illustrate aspects. And actually, behind me here, I've listed 11 aspects, and they basically describe my life quite succinctly with these 11 aspects. And we find those 11 aspects in the birth chart, which I've got is drawn here behind me here. And I'm going to write what I'm about to say, I'll write it down in the description, so you don't need to remember the details. And if you're new to astrology, it's going to be, well, incomprehensible largely. But hopefully, by using my birth chart, you can see how effective it is, how relatively simple and effective and accurate. So all of the planets, in respect to aspects, all the planets do conjunction, that's 0 degrees separation, and opposition, that's 180 degrees opposition. All of the planets do this. And I add Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, which are not part of systems approach to Vedic astrology. By and large, I follow systems approach to the letter. But here's one exception. I add Uranus, Neptune and Pluto to the planets. You know, the longitude of these planets to a chart. And they do, like all of the planets, conjunction and opposition. That's 0 degrees and 180 degrees. Mars, Jupiter and Saturn and the moon's nodes do extra aspects. Mars does a forward square, that's 90 degree separation. There's an example in my birth chart. And Mars also does an opposition plus 30 degrees in conjunct, but not the 150 degree in conjunct, the 210 degree. That's 180 plus 30. Saturn does forward sextile, 60 degree separation, and it does a backward square, 270 degree separation. The moon's nodes and Jupiter do 120, that's a trine, and 240 degree separation. They're trines. And Jupiter and the moon's nodes both do those. So I'll write that in the description. If you're not familiar with astrology, you don't even know what aspects are, and I'll illustrate what they are here. If you are familiar with Western astrology, you think, what the foxtel? What is he talking about? Why are the planets making these funny degrees? Well, these angles are part of traditional Vedic astrology. Only traditional Vedic astrology has a few more. They make it even more complicated. And the main difference with these aspects is that, so Mars makes a forward square, and it may make a forward square to a planet, but the aspect is one way. And there's an example in my chart. Mars is, let's say the moon is 90 degrees ahead of Mars. Mars makes this aspect to the moon, and it's quite a tight orb. Actually, the orb we can see here. Mars square the moon. Oh no, I haven't written it down yet. But let's work it out. So the moon is approximately 90 degrees ahead of Mars. So Mars is aspecting the moon. But the moon does not aspect Mars. Big difference, very important. Mars is a benefic planet for my ascendant, which I went through in my previous video, benefic and malefic. And so Mars makes a nice aspect to the moon. It helps and supports the moon. But the moon does not aspect Mars. The moon doesn't make backward squares, and the moon doesn't make squares at all. All of the only aspects the moon makes are conjunction and opposition. So, what exactly is this angle? You can see that it's approximately 91 degrees from between the Mars and the moon. 30, 60, 90, 3 signs, that's 90 degrees, plus approximately 1 more degree. But if it was 91, we would be aspecting 21 degrees 34 minutes Libra, and it's a bit less. It's actually 13 degrees less. That's 47 minutes of arc. And we're going to write that down. And I'm going to write down all the aspects. For the moment, you won't, it's probably important that you can see. I'm a bit stuck with the format. So we started with the Mars square the moon. And that angle is 0 degrees, 90 degrees, with a difference of 0 degrees and 47 minutes. The next aspect is here, Moon and Neptune, which is a conjunction. So, yes, the moon rules the 6th, and mainly the aspect we're interested in is that Neptune is aspecting the moon. It's actually afflicting. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are malefic. And the angle here, in the future of astrology, these will be degrees decimals. It'll make this much easier. But in the meantime, we use degrees and minutes. And so the angle here, the difference is 1 degree and 46 minutes. The next aspect is that, and here I'm going to mention quickly that this degree on the ascendant, 12 degrees 37, is the most effective point of every house. In this respect, systems approach to Vedic astrology is like using equal houses. But while this is the most effective point in every house, 12 degrees 37, it's not the boundary. The boundary of every house is 0 degrees of the sign to 30 degrees of the sign. These are the boundaries of the sign. This is the most effective point. So it's a mixture of whole signs and equal houses. And it works. That's all you need to know. So this is the most effective point in every house, including the 7th. And Venus, you can see, is approximately 3 degrees from the most effective point of the 7th house. In fact, it's 3 degrees and 5 minutes. Because if you add 3 degrees in 5 minutes, you get 12 degrees 37. That's the degree on the ascendant here. So Venus is making a conjunction with the 7th house, and it's making an aspect opposite the 1st house, MEP, most effective point, MEP, most effective point in each house. The next aspect is the moon's node is making a trine, a 240 degree aspect to Saturn, with an orb of 3 degrees and 22 minutes. Can we verify that? If we add 3 degrees 22, we get 535, which is the degree of Saturn here. So all the way around, 240 degrees with an orb of 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 22 minutes. The next one is the proximity of Mercury and Sun to conjunction. Actually, I'm wrong. It's Mercury's proximity to the MEP of the 8th, which is 3 degrees and 23 minutes. The MEP is at 12 degrees 37 minutes of the 8th. If you add 3 degrees 23 minutes, the MEP will come to Mercury. And Mercury is also making an opposition to the most effective point, MEP of the 2nd. And that's 3 degree 23 minute orb. The next aspect is the proximity of Saturn directly opposite Venus. This is, you can see, it's very close to 4 degrees. It's just slightly less. 3 degrees, 57 minutes. And then we come to Mercury and the Sun. 5 degrees, 40 minutes. Then we have the proximity of Uranus to the MEP of the 7th house. The MEP is 12 degrees 37, and so here we have a difference of 6 degrees 41 minutes. Saturn's proximity to the ascendant is 7 degrees and 2 minutes. The south node here is aspecting Venus, 240 degrees with an orb of 7 degrees and 19 minutes. From here all the way to here, 240, hang on, to here, 240 plus 7 degrees and 19 minutes brings you to Venus. One more, and I'm skipping the moon and the sun and the Mars and their proximity to their respective MEPs. I'm skipping those, and I'm going straight to the fact of Pluto. How far is Pluto from the MEP of the 7th? It is 9 degrees and 11 minutes. You can see if you add 9 degrees, you get 21. If you add 11, you get 48. 21, 48. That's 9 degrees and 11 minutes, Pluto. And it makes a conjunction to the 7th, and it makes an opposition to the ascendant with an orb of 9 degrees and 11 minutes. And now let's move the camera over here. And you can see that list of all of those aspects. All of those aspects, there's 11 of them listed, and they're orbs from the tightest to the furthest at 9 degrees, 11 minutes. Now, unique to the systems approach to Vedic astrology is a form of called direction, where 1 degree is 10 years. It may be familiar to you, Western astrologers, of solar arc direction, where 1 degree equals 1 year. And this is 1 degree equals 10 years. And it's the most useful tool out of systems approach of all, in my opinion. When I discovered in particular that Moon-Neptune conjunction corresponds to 18 years of age, then that explains a lot about my whole life, in fact. So now we're going to make a column, and we're going to use 1 degree equals 10 years. And so each of these orbs becomes a time of life. And these go like this. First one is 8. So bear in mind, if 1 degree equals 10 years, 1 year corresponds to 6 minutes of arc. So 8 years is in fact 0 degrees 48 minutes exactly, but it's 47, so it's a little bit before 8 years of age. And this one we're going to call 18. In respect to the first one, I can say that, well, Mars is making a nice aspect on the moon. It's benefic. It's a benefic aspect. And my schooling was went well. And you know what this means in particular? The moon's in the 9th, Mars in the 6th. It meant that I respected my teachers and was willing to learn from them. It changed later. Nowadays, there's not many teachers who I am prepared to learn from. Yes, I'm proud of what I've learned, and not many people have studied as thoroughly as I have, in my opinion. Which is, well, there are still some teachers, Professor Chowdhury, like I say, Rudolf Steiner, Robert Powell. There are still teachers who I have a lot of respect for, but not many who I deal with face to face. Another one is, while I'm thinking of it, Georg Kuhlewind. So, at this one, 18 years, you know what I was doing at 18 years of age? I was choosing a tertiary education, and I just messed up completely and never recovered in a way. And this also had this moon, the ruler of the 6th, and Neptune's influence. I lost like day-to-day rhythm, 6th house, health, like actually healthy habits. That's what the 6th house is. The things we do every day, are they, like brushing my teeth, which mind you, I didn't do, and in consequence lost 2 of my teeth much later, but it was due to bad routines, and diet and sleep, all of these things in a routine. And if the 6th house is strong, it's a certain calmness. You take that away and you get exhilaration. And I did like riding a motorbike, much to my mother's dismay, if you like. They say motorcycle riders, and they say temporary citizen, but it's not the fact that they might die. That's not, that's not the worst that can happen. The worst that can happen is spinal injury. Christopher Reeve had an accident on a tractor and was subsequently a quadriplegic. Now, to me, that is worse than death. Of course, it's not for the people who love you. They would rather you were a quadriplegic and your life continued, maybe. Not necessarily, but maybe. But for you, for me, I would rather be dead. Anyway, so the moon, Neptune, afflicts my moon. And this age in particular, I chose a bad tertiary course and I never recovered. 3 years into my course, I failed and got kicked out. I never got over that. And this represents a boundary in my life. Until I was 18, I was a success at practically everything, except, well, it's kind of a joke, but except at humbleness, maybe. But I was successful at sport and I was successful at academics, practically in the top 0.1% in academics and good at a lot of sports. What was missing in my life in particular was arts. But at this particular threshold, before that I was success, and after that almost universal failure at everything I attempted, which the astrology doesn't exactly point to that, but this is a threshold. Having failed university, then I never, and what was most noticeable is that I could never keep a job. That was until I was 40 years old. Here. That's when for the very first time, I had a job that I wanted to keep. Until then, I did jobs I didn't like any of them. So here, this Venus corresponds to 30. Venus, the ruler of my ninth house. And so we immediately put the name of a teacher, ninth house. And I started an art school teaching some of Rudolf Steiner's artistic techniques. And I met the mother of my daughter, who, by the way, is an artist. Venus is art. So we had a daughter. Now, I know we're not in follow mode. Over there I have a picture which kind of shows that 30 years has a fundamental meaning in everyone's life, a generic meaning. And I'm going to put in a couple more of these in my early 30s, and then I'm going to turn the camera to that picture over there. The north node, this corresponds to 33, and at this age I separated with the mother of my daughter. So, indicative of the malefic aspect, the malefic nature of the moon's node. And this one, at the same age, a little bit later, Mercury is afflicting the second house of family. And I was separated from my daughter. My daughter and her mum went overseas. Didn't know how long they would be away at the time, but they turned out to be 7 years. And for me, this was painful. For my mother and father, it was devastating. So it had a big effect on family life. What do I put here? My daughter went overseas. My mother, her mother went overseas with my daughter. Anyway, I'm not going to write it there. But it had a profound effect on my family, second house. Notice that also Mercury is aspecting its own sign, the MEP of the 8th house, its own sign, and that's good news. When a planet aspects its own sign, even though it's malefic and it harms the second, it's also aspecting its own sign here. And you know what happened, but it was delayed, and I can't explain this, but I inherited money when I was 40. I inherited money from my grandmother's cousin. No, I'm not going to say how much. I nearly did, but it's like inheritance. Quite unexpected. And at that point, I'm going to turn the camera around this way. So here quickly is a generic map of the life journey, starting with 0, birth, and 7 years, change of teeth, 14 years, puberty, 21, adulthood, 28, 35, 42. These three periods all correspond to the sun. The first period of life is the moon. This period from change of teeth to puberty, Mercury. From puberty to 21, Venus. Growth corresponds to here. The growth to maturity. And then we have 42 to 49 is Mars, 49 to 56 is Jupiter, 56 to 63 is Saturn. And it's not like life ends, but we run out of planets. Oh, and the middle of this trajectory is 31 and a half. This is an important age. Notice that this is the kind of the period of life in which Jesus was conducting his ministry. This is also the age when any bodhisattva receives their mission. Rudolf Steiner is an example. You know, you don't identify bodhisattvas until they've been dead for 100 years. And that's just happened with Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner received his mission at about this age and began teaching. And that's what happens with a bodhisattva, this much time. So there's a certain maturity reached here, the middle of life. Notice that the period of the sun, 21 to 42, this is a busy time of life when we may be having children, but it's just a busy time of life in which, well, life gets a hold of you and there may be many obligations, for example. Just so this picture indicates the importance of this age. Now we're back to this picture. And there are two more which have happened in my life. All right, two more. Saturn and Venus, age 40. And what happened here, actually I'll put two things. I started a job as a tennis coach. And for the first time in my life, I had a job I wanted to keep. A job that I loved. And I became, what happened? I was already familiar with the work of Robert Powell, but I actually met him here. He visited Australia for about 8 consecutive years and did workshops. I love his book, and I'll show it to you, Chronicle of the Living Christ. That's what it looks like. In which he uses the diary of Anne Catherine Emmerich, who lived in day-to-day visions of Jesus' life. And because Rudolf Steiner said every step that Jesus took during his ministry was conducted in harmony with the heavens. And that's what Robert Powell takes up as a research subject, plotting the positions of the planets for every day of Jesus' ministry. And then this one is age 56. Notice the benefic aspect here of Venus on Saturn and Saturn on Venus. Coaching has to do with teaching, the 9th house. The first house has to do with general aptitude, general skills. The Venus in the 7th means relating to the client. Anyway, this was a good thing. This inheritance happened at this age, but really the correspondence is to the 8th for inheritance. So it's a bit confusing. It's possible that when I was 33 years old, this inheritance was written into my grandmother cousin's will, that this was written into the will here when I was this old, and it came to maturity when she passed away here. It's one explanation. This one is bad news, and when the sun's involved, you can immediately say, how's your father? And what happened was a little earlier than this, my father got dementia and basically went out of my life. And a little while after this, he passed away. And right in the middle, I lost this job as a tennis coach. So in a way, the person who I worked for was a kind of a father figure. And there's something else I want to talk about. For my whole life, Mercury, until the age of 56, Mercury got closer and closer to afflicting the sun. And during this time, especially since I was 14 years old, my relationship with my father got worse, deteriorated. My relationship with my father deteriorated all the way up, and then he passed away. Actually, when he got dementia, I guess that was the worst part of my relationship to my father. So there we go, father, dementia. And what happened is my boss, of tennis coaching, he lost his contract, and so my job was gone. It took me a while to get another one, and also at this time is COVID. I'm going to put that here. And in Melbourne, we had the longest lockdowns of anywhere in the world at the time. I think subsequently China had longer lockdowns, but at the time, Melbourne was the most locked down city in the world. And then I lost my job. My boss was there's a word, was it like an interim father? Foster, but not really. But it was more like, this job was more like a relationship than a job. And then my father passed away. Without an inheritance, because my mother's still living. And yes, and my father left everything to my mum. So there are these 4 more. So here ends the past and what I can describe what happened, like the facts. Failed university, but it wasn't until 3 years later. That was 3 years after that, 21, 22. And let me say this one, I guess, has been progressing slowly and will come to maturity at the age of 70. This one, this is good. This one's bad. And I'm not going to, I'll talk about this maybe another time. This is age 73. This one is age 92. And this represents the end of life. And would I live to 92? Well, I've got a strong first house, and that's likely. What's so important to me is that the quality of my life continues until mid-80s. I want to be mobile until I'm 88. Actually, I want to be, the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II. She was working until the day she died. And I'm not forgotten how old she was, but she was in it to her 90s. Now this one I'm going to talk about, this one corresponds to age 66. Uranus is malefic. What will it do to me here? And I have one story which I'm going to finish this video with, which, obviously this didn't happen yet. I'm now 61 and a half. This is 5.5 years hence. But something did happen which I reckon resembles. Uranus is violent. Neptune is addicted. Pluto is fatal. So I'll just describe something that happened to me and makes me attune to this kind of Uranus aspect. And you see, I had an e-scooter. I don't have an e-scooter anymore. And I've spent a lot of time on the roads in Melbourne. I drove a taxi. I've driven 1 million kilometres. I know how the roads work. And I've also ridden a bicycle on the roads. And there is a lot of situations in which I will not ride on the road. I'll go on the footpath. When the lanes are narrow, there's no bike path, the lanes are narrow and the traffic's going quite quickly. Actually, almost if there's no bike path, I won't be on the road. Now, that's not entirely true. But what happened, I pulled up at an intersection, and I was pulling up at an intersection and a car came next to me, sharing the lane as I was slowing down at a red light, and he came zooming up quite very close. This close. Close enough that I could easily stick my foot out and kick his car, which I did, to try and teach him that that's too close. Well, this kick in the passenger door of his car, it was just like taking a stick. And we don't have hornets in Australia, but I know what hornets are like. You take a stick and you go whack on a hornet's nest and see what happens. And what happens is they go berserk. The equivalent in Australia is bull ants. Bull ants are ultra aggressive animals. You aggravate them and they will, doesn't matter the fact that you're 1,000 times taller than they will come for you. And hornets, of course, are like winged bull ants. And so I kicked the door of this bloke's car and he came after me. And he cut me off and he got out of his car and came at me with a steering lock first. And I rode past and he threw the steering lock at me, but it was a feeble throw. And I know for a moment I could have neutralised the situation. For a moment, I was closer to that steering lock than he was. And if I stopped my scooter, picked up the steering lock, nothing would have happened. What's he going to do? He wants that steering lock. He paid $35 for that. He's not going to let me just keep it. But he can't come near me without the risk of my doing what he wanted to do to me. Give me a whack in the head, I felt. Yeah? Hit me in the head with that steering lock. So, but I was scared. I just kept going and got off the main road and basically went into a laneway and slowly went down the laneway with my heart going over 100 beats per minute. Boom, 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 boom. And eventually, gradually and slowly, I approached the main road again. And I crossed over to the other side and went along the footpath. But you know what? he did a U-turn, came back looking for me, or maybe he'd already seen me. I don't know. I was off the road for a while, and then I'm coming to an intersection, and he pulls in to the road in front of me, facing me, and I didn't even, if I knew it was him again, but I didn't know it was him. I kind of ignored the fact of that's him again, and slowed down to go around. I could have avoided him because there was a dead end, and I could have zipped through, turned right. Another opportunity to get away it was. But he stopped, but then when I was directly in front of him, he ran into me. So he wasn't going real fast, but he did run into me head on and got me in the shin. And then, having knocked the scooter out from under me, he then ran over the scooter, did a U-turn and took off down the road. There were witnesses who got his phone number, and he got caught. In the meantime, my scooter's wrecked and I've got a knee injury, which really upset me for probably 2 weeks, until gradually I got the strength back in my knee. ACL, I'd damaged it before. Anyway, this kind of violent confrontation I associate with Uranus. And now I've run out of black paper, and I'm conflicted about buying blackboards. I would rather take you, viewers, out into Melbourne while I talk about Melbourne's birth chart, because now I've described all of the aspects, like pun, all of the aspects of systems approach which I use to read a birth chart. And what I want to do is use all those aspects of systems approach on a birth chart for Melbourne. And I want to do that in situ. I want to go to the points, parts, scenes, activities around Melbourne, and we'll see if that's... I've been practicing. I've been taking my camera with me when I go on the train, and possibly it may not be my first destination, but I want to take you to the place where Melbourne was born.